Good morning. Happy March Madness. Happy March 1st. We're going to start all over. This is fun. Okay, so today is March 1st. Time is flying by, and we're answering your questions about Cadillac leg springs, specifically for those who are shorter people. The question asked also about a specific type of Cadillac. And look, you know what? Because of the rise of popularity and all the countries in the world that are making equipment, it's hard for me to track all of the equipment. So I'm actually just going to kind of demystify how you choose leg springs, whether you're short, tall, or depending on what you need in today's live. That way you can apply it to whatever Cadillac you have. Does that sound cool? Before we get into that, I do want to say March 1st means the start of March Madness. Today is the 100. So in Joe's Return to Life book, you'll see 34 exercises. And obviously there's 31 days in March. So there's a couple days we double up. But if you have my mat deck, you'll notice that there's a few extra exercises in there. And that's just because over time, Joe had added some exercises to his mat practice, and then Ramana added a few more. So you will see... if you follow along, we have a blog on OPC, or you can check out my Instagram. I show which ones are the 34. Honestly, if you just do whatever you want in March with the mat, that makes me happy. So tag me in your March mat practice specifically, because I just want to celebrate you. I believe the mat work is such a great tool. It's the great revealer. It tells us what our body is able to do on its own, right? Which is how we live life. We don't have springs and reformers to help us grocery shop or go hiking. We don't have, or a Cadillac for that matter. So what you struggle with in the mat is why the rest of the apparatus exists, right? So grab your mat deck at onlinepilatesclasses.com. Thank you for supporting small business. Okay, so let's talk about leg springs. So you'll notice a difference, like look at the length of these leg springs, right? And then this is an arm spring. Okay, so obviously this one's thinner, this one's longer. Some companies have different color springs. Specifically, I'll talk about Balance Body has long yellow and short yellow. So a long yellow would be a lighter leg spring. A short yellow would be an arm spring. That said, I find it's just easier to talk about tension and support. And then that helps you choose what kind of spring. So in Ch and in classical, we have regular arm and leg springs. And then this pack, if you go to Ch website, this is called the J pack. These are heavier leg springs and arm springs. And J specifically remembers that there was 2 leg springs and 2 types of arm springs. There was a regular and a heavy. And over time, what it feels like happened is that the light leg springs became the arm springs. And then the arm springs became the rollback bar springs, and things got a little confused. So if you are ever on a Contrology, you'll notice that the rollback bar springs feel different than the arm springs. And then you can order these J-Pack. So here's what I will say. My J-Pack leg springs, I'll use, I'm 5'9", weigh a decent amount for that. And so sometimes if I've been out of my practice for a while, or I'm struggling, I just come back from travel. If I'm doing airplane or leg springs in the air, I might give myself this heavier leg spring, to be honest, because I need that support, right? But typically I give this to my over 6'3" guys, just because their leg is heavy. They need this kind of support. Otherwise, it's just hanging up in a room, not being used. My heavy arm springs, I typically use these for standing single leg springs because my leg springs are 1, long, and 2, too heavy. So I'll use my heavy arm springs as a leg spring for standing exercises. Otherwise, I pretty much save these for my super, super strong people because they are ridiculously strong. You can see that, right? So why does this matter? How does this answer the question? So the question asker said, I'm 5 feet tall, so these leg springs are too long for me. So when it comes to choosing leg springs, what I do with people, so if you have my Cadillac deck, I have a measurement card, so you know where to put your arm springs and leg springs, because some apparatus have a sliding bar, some apparatuses have 100 hooks, and you're like, which ones do I use? Some have numbers. So you'll see I only have 1 hook for my leg springs. So if you are on the shorter side, especially I would say on the fun size, then me putting leg springs on that hook might actually be not just too long, like our question asker asked, but it might be too much tension. And so therefore keeping your pelvis on the mat might not be possible. So what I would do, and this goes to the question asker, I actually would just take my arm springs and put it there. If my arm springs still mean that person cannot keep their pelvis on the mat, I'm going to switch them to leg springs at the arm spring setting. If that's too heavy, then we're going to go arm spring on the arm spring setting with the loop. Okay, let me just recap. So if leg springs on the leg spring setting is too much for a client, then I'll start with arm springs on the leg spring setting. If that's the angle is wrong, then I will switch to leg springs on the arm spring setting, because just because you're 5 foot tall doesn't mean you're not strong, right? Then I will switch, if that doesn't work, to arm springs at the arm spring setting. If that's where I land, then eventually I might actually play between a heavy arm spring and a regular arm spring just to see if I'm giving them right support. Heavier on the Cadillac doesn't always mean more advanced. It just means more support, more resistance, right? This is why you have to kind of understand what you're wanting to see or feel in your body. Should I use a heavy arm spring? Should I use a light arm spring, a regular arm spring, right? So that's how I would do it. And then some people are like in that 5'4", 5'5" category where it's like, is this better or is that better, right? Is an arm spring on a leg spring better, or is a leg spring and arm spring better? And I would say that's going to kind of depend on their body, right? If they have a shorter torso, it might actually be harder for them to keep the pelvis down. If they have a longer, you know what I mean? So it's just going to depend on the person. And this is where taking time to understand what it is that you're looking for and what connected really looks like and feels like. I think a lot of people get a little too obsessed with cues and choreography versus like, does this look like the person is moving with the springs, or does it look like the springs are moving them around, or does it look like they are pushing the springs around? It needs to be a great dance partner, right? If you look at dynamic duos, we just had the Winter Olympics. If you look at figure skating, they have to work together. Otherwise, someone gets hurt. The same rules apply when it comes to springs. The springs need to support the practice you have, right? And where you're at. And I have gone from, in my practice, even at 5'9", there was a time that regular leg springs were just too much tension for me. And I actually worked with heavy arm springs at the leg spring setting. And because of my height, that's a better angle for me. Then as I got stronger, you'd think that I wouldn't need a heavier leg spring, but I actually did to actually do more of the advanced work, right? If my body has a disconnected day, a bad night's sleep, I flew on a plane, I might play with more of a heavier spring and then work my way back to the regular leg spring. It's very fluid. And I think that's important to remember. Every exercise you do in Pilates is kind of fluid. The first rep is going to feel different than the third rep. Yesterday is going to be different than today. And that's why I love classical Pilates so much, because it's much like weight training in that you repeat the same moves, not because of being lazy or bored, but because you're actually comparing yourself to yourself. It's a lot easier to see if your practice is advancing if you are able to go back to an exercise and compare you to you, right? I'm not knocking contemporary at all when I say that there's, I'm sure, very amazing ways that happens. But I do think that some people think that classical is outdated, but I would say that those same people wouldn't think that weight training is outdated. They work very much in the same thing, and that you are comparing yourself to yourself in that way. Anyways, that is your breakdown on which springs to use and when. On the Cadillac, this applies to the tower as well, my loves. Springboards, again, if you have my Cadillac deck, I have the measurements. I don't have them memorized. I'm so sorry, but they are translated into centimeters as well. You'll want to play. The springboard lines are like always a little too high or a little too low. So then it depends, like, the person can keep their center stable on the mat. Any questions, Brad?
She's cheating by using the arm spring.
Oh, no. And while we're on this topic, Shields is very happy that she's not cheating by using springs on the arm spring height. Absolutely not at all. Not at all, Sheila. And I might say, by using arm springs on the arm spring height, that might be where you are today, and you might move to leg springs at the arm spring height as you get stronger, more connected. But it's definitely for fun-sized people. It's a normal thing to do. But I want to just add, what did I want to say? Oh, if you are using balance body equipment, they have a line called Centerline. It has a gray spring. So this little loop here, instead of being yellow or red or blue, it's gray. I'm obsessed with the gray springs. Grab 2 sets, make one your rollback bar, make one your arm springs. I promise you'll love them, because I find sometimes that the yellow springs are just a little lighter than I want. The blue is a little too heavy. The gray is feels more comparable to what my rollback bar is, because you do want the springs to be something that you have to work with and resist as opposed to overpower, right? Sometimes I feel like the yellows, even the short yellows, could just be a little too light for how strong someone is. Yeah. Other things you can do, I just want to say, just a reminder, it's in the Cadillacs and it's also in my tutorials. The closer you are to the poles, obviously, the easier the springs are. The further away you are from the poles, the harder the springs are. So if you are unsure if you're ready for a heavier spring, if your shoulder mobility allows, slide out to almost straight arm. Remember that the wrist should be higher than the elbows, no matter what angle you are to the poles. So if your arms are at 90, the hands are higher than the elbows. And if your arms are almost straight, the hands are higher than the elbows. But this is our Cadillac tower deck. It does have everything listed on how, if it's available on a tower or not. About 14 cards aren't available because you need the trapeze. But that's like 100 cards that you have access to. And they're really fun to play with. All that information's in there. So it's super fun. Oh, you guys, I told you last week that we are trying to figure out our schedule for when we're traveling. So I just want to let you know that March 18th, we fly to Europe, which means the Sunday after that and the next 3. So the last 2 Sundays of March and Easter Sunday, we are going to take off from our lives. I'm so sorry. The reality is many of you have been with us when we try to go live from a hotel room, and sometimes the internet isn't as good as we want. And also because I'm teaching workshops on 2 of those Sundays, it's kind of hard to make sure we can like hit the time the way we'd want to. So we just decided, let's just let you and I have 3 weeks off, and then we'll be back April 12th. So I'm going to be here next Sunday, the Sunday after that, and then it's the last 2 Sundays of March, the first one of April, that we are going to take off from these lives. But keep putting your questions in the comments. Brad might jump on live time to time to show you what we're doing in Europe. That could happen. So watch out. Make sure you're subscribed and hit the notification bell so you see those things, so you can see what we're doing in Poland and Bruges and things like that, because I will miss you. We just, our ADHD, time difference, and workshop things. It's just, you know what? We're just going to give ourselves some space and grace, and you can, and then we'll jump back in on, I believe it's April 12th. It's a Sunday. So I'll see you next week with more lives. Thank you so much. Have an amazing day.